Last week we had started looking at the story of the raising of Lazarus. So I will switch to the screen on that. And here it's interesting, the subhead in the NIV here says, instead of saying the raising of Lazarus, they say the death of Lazarus. So, maybe there's better news to come. Do they, no, let's see. Oh, they comfort the sisters. What do the subheads say? Oh, there he raises from the Lazarus from the dead a little later. All right, so we set the scene first, set the story first, like verse 11. Even the scene is set a little bit earlier in that Jesus, chapter 10, verse 40, Jesus went back across the Jordan. So he's some distance away from the family in Bethany. Then chapter 11 tells us that Lazarus was sick. He's from Bethany. Mary and Martha, we are introduced to them. Some of the few non-disciples that we are given names of. All right, they were disciples, that they weren't part of the 12. Yeah, there were more than 12 disciples, and these were some of the additional ones. Jesus had disciples in Judea as well as in Galilee. These were in Judea. And it connects it with Mary, who's poured perfume on the Lord, and that's actually covered in the next chapter, so we can talk about that maybe next week. So they sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. It's interesting that, they would expect him to understand the one you love. That's, I don't know, was there a common way of referring to him? The one you love, so some think that he's the beloved disciple that is referred to later in this gospel, who had a part and hand in writing it. But there's no proof of that. It's just interesting that it does specifically, and it picks out specific people here that says that Jesus loved. Presumably, he loved them all, but he had special fondness for some, I suppose. So verse 4, when Jesus heard this, he said, this sickness will not end in death. So they, wouldn't expect Lazarus to die. But he's hidden meaning here in what he's saying. Now it is for God's glory. The sickness is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. They might wonder, how does his sickness help glorify God? But God is glorified with a healing and as well as with a resurrection, either way. But Jesus kind of answers in a cryptic way. It doesn't come right out and say it at first. It says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, not what they expected to happen. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Verse 8, but Rabbi, they said, a short while, Rabbi, it's interesting they called him Rabbi. I hadn't thought about that. It's kind of Matthew even tells us, Jesus says, do not call anybody Rabbi. But he does get called Rabbi in a few other places. And this is one. They said a teacher, functions as as teacher. The word is derived from Aramaic for my great one. And that's probably why Jesus said, don't use that kind of title, but when it loses that kind of reverence attached to it, it means no more than teacher. That's how Mark, I think, translates it as rabbi. This means teacher. The teacher, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back. Hey, that's a dangerous place. And they could have well asked, can't you heal Lazarus from afar like you did for the daughter of Jairus? That was back in Galilee, maybe a couple of years earlier. But still, the idea is that Jesus could heal from afar. He wouldn't necessarily have to go there. So they are a bit surprised that he, wait, and they hear that Lazarus is sick. Jesus stays where he is for a couple of days, so they assume that he's not going to go anywhere. But now all of a sudden he says, oh, yes, we will go. And they're wondering, oh, they're trying to kill you. Why? For Jesus answered in verse 9, aren't there 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It's when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. So Jesus is kind of answering their question with a puzzling proverb. Is he saying that it was nighttime before and now it's daytime? Is he saying, well, it's now time for us to work? When people don't understand, they stumble. I'm not sure how this proverb fits into the context. And any ideas from you? It's just like Jesus says some puzzling things, is riddles, and it's a challenge for us to try to figure out what it is, and it was for the disciples too. But anyway, verse 11, after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. And again, he's less than clear. And so they ask him, hey, explain this. His disciples replied, if he's sleeping, he'll get better. People get sick when they sleep. That gives their body time to heal. People often get sleep for a while and get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, John tells us, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. Well, and no wonder. I'm sure that Jesus figured that his disciples would take him to be talking about natural sleep. But he told them plainly in verse 14, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. Let us go to him. Again, it's a bit of a puzzle because Jesus could have performed a miracle on his illness, and they could have believed because of that. He could have healed from afar. He could have healed while he was there. There are many different ways that he could have helped in this situation. As it turns out, and if we put the timing together, it still takes Jesus a couple more days to get to Bethany, and by that time Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. So he apparently died shortly after word was first sent to him that Lazarus was sick. And so Jesus, he was dead by the time that Jesus heard the news that he was sick. And Jesus still said, well, we'll just stay here a couple days. So there's interesting wrinkles going on here in the timing of the events. And John tells us how many days these things happened. And we can put those pieces together and kind of puzzle at them too. So why did Jesus wait? Well, he waited, as he says here, for a couple of reasons, so that God will be glorified. And he mentions here that so that you may believe. So he's going to be doing something that will help them believe. This is the last of the 7 signs, these miracles that Jesus does in the book and Gospel of John. There are a couple of great miracles that come later. One is the resurrection of Jesus himself, and the other is a miraculous catch of fish on the Sea of Galilee. But before his crucifixion, Jesus has 7 signs. This is the last one, kind of the climax, the most important, the most significant one, the most revealing of Jesus' power. Any comments? Mm-hmm. Well, okay, he says Lazarus is dead. Let us go to him. They reminded Jesus that, well, people are looking to kill you. So in verse 16, Thomas, also known as Didymus, which means the twin, Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. That's kind of a pessimistic thing to say. Obviously, Thomas is not expecting any great miracle to happen in terms of raising Lazarus from the dead. He's just saying, all right, we're going into trouble. We'll go with you. We are with you to the bitter end. Little interesting glimpse as to the personality of Thomas there. So they all go to Bethany. And verse 17, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, 4 was culturally significant. They thought that when people died, the soul might hover around the body for 3 days or so, hoping for a revival. But after that, it gives up and goes away. So when Lazarus had been already in the tomb for 4 days, they said, well, it's hopeless. The soul was gone. There's only decomposition going on. So Jesus counters even that when they knew that he was, well, completely dead. They probably would have already anointed him with spices, the body with spices a couple of times. So they were quite aware that he was dead. Verse 18, John fills us in on some geography there. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. And many Jews, apparently referring to many Jews from Jerusalem, had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. So they were people that are fairly well known in the area. Apparently they had a house that was big enough to entertain people. And so they would have been part of the upper income strata of the area. And a lot of people knew them. Verse 20, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. So in some ways, this story gives a different picture of Mary and Martha than the story we see in the book of Luke, for example. In that one, Martha and Luke, Martha is the one who does the homework, and Mary is going to, listening to Jesus. Here, the tables are turned. Mary is staying home. Martha is the one coming out to Jesus. And she says something quite significant about Jesus. She has a great confession of faith. Verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You would have healed him. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. It's not clear what she might have been thinking at that point. She doesn't seem to be thinking of a resurrection. But yet her statement, maybe it's as in the case of Caiaphas later, that she is speaking better than she knows, that what she says is true in a more significant way than she could have thought at the time. She is sure that Jesus, that God answers Jesus' prayers. She just doesn't know what he's going to pray or what he's going to be doing, but she expresses trust, faith in him. Verse 23, Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "Yeah, I know that. I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." That's part of standard Jewish teaching of the day. Jesus said to her then, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. Whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? So, "Yes, Lord," she says. Then here's this confession of faith. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world, that you are the predicted Messiah." Jesus is also giving here another one of his "I am" statements, in this case, the seventh and most significant one, the resurrection and the life. That is pointing to our eternal life, our salvation in Jesus. And he admits in verse 25, yes, the people do die, but they will live. There will be a resurrection. And from the saying, Martha says, well, yes, all that will happen at the last day. She's not expecting it to happen right now and right down, today, right when they were speaking. But she expresses that Jesus, will do these things. And it's not just a Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. It also implies that Jesus is the Messiah, the one who will usher in the new age and in the future and resurrect everyone. This is not just an ordinary human leader, human that God appointed to do something. This is a far greater status than any person has ever had, to be the resurrection and the life. Any comments from you? Well, after this expression of faith in verse 28, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. She says, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." So Mary came. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. It wasn't a very big village, so it wasn't a very far distance for him to travel, or for them to travel. I'm not sure why Jesus had not entered, but he stayed out there. So Mary went out to greet him. When verse 31, when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. So, as part of their duty to be with those who are grieving, they would follow her too. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, same words, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." In a way, there's a tinge of blame there. Like we sent word to you earlier and you didn't come. Lazarus is dead because you were slow to respond. I mean, there is an expression of faith, but also kind of an implied criticism too. And which is meant there, I am, maybe both are meant. But where John repeats this same phrase for both Martha and Mary. So he must see some significance in that as kind of expressing their trust, and yet puzzlement maybe is the better word for They don't understand why Jesus did not come when sent for. And I mean, that happens to us today too. Jesus does not always respond to us the way we might want. We ask for healing or intervention in some way, and it doesn't happen. And yet we still need to trust him that he knows what he's doing. That, waiting is, well, he's in charge. We're not. And all we can do is trust him in that. Verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And commentators are troubled here too, because they don't know what was Jesus so troubled about. The Greek word often indicates some element of anger. So what would he be angry about? Maybe the biggest enemy here is death, and he could be angry that death disrupts all these relationships and causes such grief for people. He's well acquainted with death. He's been living for 30 some years, so he would have seen quite a bit. It's just for these people, this family that he especially loved, it made a bigger impression on him perhaps than the others. So he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And he asked, "Where have you laid him?" He asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And then Jesus wept. And again, people are not quite sure why he wept. Was he weeping as an expression of solidarity with them? Was he genuinely sad at what he saw? Anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
So Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yes. Thank you. I was thinking about that as you were discussing. What could have caused Jesus to weep? Was he kind of upset that people didn't believe him, or did he weep because Lazarus, his friend, died? So as you were talking about it, I was thinking many times I've wept for no apparent reason, like watch a good movie. You know what I mean? It's a good movie, very emotional. Somebody cried, and then I get carried away too because of the emotion, what is happening. Because I'm but a human. Being human, it's our nature. Sometimes we cry. So it's not a big deal to me. That shows that Jesus Christ is being human. The situation in that area caused him to weep. I don't know exactly what it is, but he is being human. That's my answer.
Yeah, definitely.
Mike,
yes,
I was thinking the same thing, that it shows that he was completely human. He was responding. He said and did so many things that people didn't understand, but they were always puzzled. They may have been angry at him because he didn't come, but he was always saying something that they didn't get, and they just try to follow along as best they could. But this shows he really had the emotions of a person. But another thing that just occurred to me, and it's not to make light of anything, but it shows that down through the ages, even the dullest of us could memorize one Bible verse. Jesus wept is well within our capabilities, no matter how slow we are.
Yeah.
For me,
yes,
I was thinking of Jesus Christ before. I'm gonna prove something to you guys. don't worry, he's just sleeping. And this is not to death. It's just like he's saying it to his friends, and they do not know what's going on. More especially, I don't know how many years they've been with him. And he was, I guess, also expecting that the family of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus know better that everything is going to work out for good. It's just like going to prove a point, but they're not getting the point. So I guess he was like, I guess they really do not know what I am going to imply. It's just like you're disappointed that, I'm not saying it's a test, but it's just like they believe, but they did not really pass the test of, can you trust 100%? But he say, yeah, I believe, but so I guess that's the reason why he wept, because for him, he was thinking that, oh, my best friends will be with me 100%, but now they're kind of believe but doubting. So I guess that's the reason why he wept. Like, I'm proving a point, 4 days dead. Everybody thinks that everyone, it's hopeless, but it's really, there's no hopelessness if you have Jesus Christ. So I guess he was disappointed, but he dilly-dally. But when he saw that Martha and Mary are crying, you believe, but you don't really believe. Who else will kind of believe in me? Even the disciples really don't know what's going on. So I just, okay, let's do it now. I'll make a point now to prove that what I'm saying is that really true. Just believe in me 100% up to death. Yeah. So I guess he wept because they believe, but they did not really fully believe. To see is to believe, just like Thomas. Anyway, that's my point, why he wept.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, one other point on Mary and Martha and what they said. I think anybody that deals with people that are grieving, especially when they've just suffered loss, they'll say anything. There are all kinds of things. Blame the doctor because the person, they couldn't save the person who died. All kinds of things like that. And when in the throes of grief, it almost seems like we're not always responsible for what we say. It just
Yes.
we blurt it out, and it seems silly later on, but it just comes out.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, Mike, you also mentioned that the reason that Jesus Christ delayed his coming or going, because he has a purpose to prove himself. And that means too that he knows that people will be disappointed. Like us too, we get disappointed when we pray to God and he's quiet about it. It's human nature.
Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I guess the disappointment accentuated the significance, the drama of the miracle, that amplified it. I was just thinking that, that here, Jesus wept. Well, that's the shortest verse in the English Bible. And in the Greek Bible, there's a verse that's shorter. That's 1 Thessalonians 5, I think it's verse 13, where pray without ceasing. The Greek words are short there. That's the English translation is kind of long on that one, but longer than the Greek. But anyway, yeah, lots of people know this verse. Jesus wept. And then John doesn't tell us exactly why, but yet the next verse does give us a hint about something there. And the Jews said, see how he loved him. So John is kind of giving us a context, and he's inviting us to see this weeping as an expression of love for Lazarus and the family that it's like, that this is a normal thing to do at a funeral. When you're visiting the tomb, you're sad to see the person gone. So that's the Jewish interpretation. Although, well, I say, yeah, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes the disciples are wrong. Well, we're invited, and certainly we can agree that, yeah, it does show Jesus' humanity. That's he had emotions. He was not just deeply troubled or angry, but yeah, this weeping is also another side of being human. As Burmy said, yeah, we weep for all sorts of things, even good things. We'll be touched by some kindness that somebody does in a movie, and that can bring tears to our eyes. We can cry at a wedding, even though we're happy, So Jesus is human, and yet he has such power. We're invited to trust him, but we have to trust also his timing. So, and then verse 37, some of them said, it's kind of a similar thought as Mary and Martha had, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? So they're kind of, there's some puzzlement there. Yeah. Well, what now? It's not too late, folks. Wait, there's more to the story. So, verse 38, Jesus, he is again deeply moved. He came to the tomb. Now he knows what's happening there, but yet he's still deeply moved. He knows the resurrection is just a few minutes away.
Mike,
yes.
Can you project the screen?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, there we are. Verse 36, 37. So yeah, they're asking about that. Oh yeah, so why did this happen? There's all sorts of things we don't know why it happened and why Jesus allows things to happen. We just have to go forward. Jesus, as deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Typical tomb of the day. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So it's kind of a mild rebuke here. Says, look, if you're going to trust me, and I tell you to roll away the stone, just roll the stone away. So they took away the stone. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And he kind of says this aside for the benefit of the audience. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. So that he is kind of reminding people he is not doing this on his own power. It's the Father who is giving the directions for what he does, what he says. That's a consistent theme in the Gospel of John, that he does only what the Father wants done. When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Then the dead man came out, still calling him a dead man, even though he wasn't dead anymore. His hands and feet were wrapped with strips of linen. Must have been a little awkward trying to come out, to walk out with these things wrapped around your feet, and a cloth around his face. So, he's groping his way out of there, I guess. So Jesus said, take off the grave clothes and let him go. And he might have said, and give him some other clothes as well. He'll need those too. Any comments on this?
You know, I like it when they show this in the movies. This instance, the music changes to horror music, you know, and he walks like a mummy. Ooh, scary, you know. If I were the director, I put a lively song, you know, happy, lively. But directors put the scary one.
Hmm. Yeah, they're trying to convey different emotions there. Surely the emotion would be astonishment, but I don't know what music goes with astonishment. The crash of drums or something. John doesn't tell us a lot of these details. I mean, here, we just have Lazarus coming out of the grave, and then, like, change of scene. John shifting his attention to something else. Verse 45. Many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did, they believed in him. These people from Jerusalem. But verse 46, there the twist in the plot. Some of them went to the Pharisees. Oh, those bad guys again. And it seems like they knew that the Pharisees were wanting to kill Jesus. And yet, yeah, they're still reporting on that. They see this stupendous miracle, and rather than showing their allegiance to Jesus, they are still allied with the Pharisees. I'm just going through these studies. I am impressed at how often John is describing this divergent reactions to Jesus, or the belief on some side and even hostility on the other. He brings that out numerous times. Verse 47, and then the chief priests and Pharisees called the meeting of the Sanhedrin. Oh, yes. I wondered, what did Thomas think of this? The one who said, let us go to Judea and die with him. I would like to get an update on Thomas, but John does not tell us how Thomas reacted to this. It was certainly not what he expected. Well, so the chief priests and Pharisees called the meeting, and they said, well, what are we accomplishing? Like, we're not getting anywhere in this. We send out word that we want to have Jesus arrested, and then he starts raising people from the dead and attracting an even bigger following. Here's this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, if he keeps doing these wonderfully great and stupendous things, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. So they were concerned about how this was going to affect them and their jobs. The Romans would come if they thought that Jesus was, and if the people were making Jesus a king, then the Romans would say, oh, this somebody who claims to be a king, or even somebody who lots of people think is going to be the next king of the Jews. We don't want that. We're going to kill him. So the Romans would come in with more troops, and I don't think they expected the temple to be destroyed, though John's readers may know that indeed it was. But when they said this, they might just think that the Romans would take over control of the temple. And up to this point, the Romans kind of let the Jewish leaders run the show there, even to that was the one place where they were allowed to impose the death penalty on Gentiles who went too far into the the court of the Israelites. So the Romans would get upset at that, take away the temple, our nation. We're not going to have any even a pretense of autonomy will just be absorbed into part of Syria, which is kind of where they were in Roman province of Syria at the time. And the procurator, Pilate, was a local administrator underneath the governorship of some Roman in Syria. But so they said, all right, this is going to be bad news for us. Jesus gets too popular. It's going to provoke a war. We can't let that happen. So we've got to do away with him before the Romans do it. Well, so you're increasing the hostility here, which leads to Jesus' crucifixion, of course. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. You guys are idiots. That's my paraphrase. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. So he's just saying, look, it's better to kill one guy than to have everybody else be, run over by the Romans. John says, well, yeah, there was truth there in that. He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And then John adds there, not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, kind of referring to the Gentiles, although not quite so directly, to bring them together and make them one, just as Jesus had earlier said, I have another flock here, and I'll bring them together and make them one. So, verse 53, from that day on, these Jewish leaders plotted to take Jesus' life. Any comments from you on those developments, going from the wonderful miracle to the anger of the leaders? The height of Jesus' power and revealing who he is. He's the resurrection and the life, contrasted with the height of opposition against him.
Verse 53.
Yes, 53.
It says, from that day on, they plotted. The word they is that the official Sanhedrin, because before they were already a desire to kill him before. So this was more like the Jewish leadership or something, official.
Yeah, I don't know if there's because John has told us earlier that they were seeking to have him arrested. Maybe now that the verse 53 just indicates they don't want to just arrest him and put him in jail, but they want to kill him. Maybe that's the increase of intensity there. I'm not sure on exactly how those previous things were worded, whether they included an idea to kill him.
It is just interesting that it is the death of Lazarus and that miracle that kind of brought about this thinking, let's kill him. Christ is really pushing it hard towards the crucifixion.
Yeah. This guy can raise the dead, so let's kill him. It's such an irony. So, verse 54, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, which we don't know where it is. Josephus does refer to a village named Ephraim, but we don't know where it is either in his writings. It must have been a fairly small village, but it was out of the way place where I guess Jesus, or they didn't think of looking there. He could hide out for a while. And he stayed there with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, so now we're we who know the story know where this is headed. It's almost time for the Jewish Passover. Many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. So some would go even a week early to have a ceremonial cleansing and turn the Passover and Days of Unleavened Bread into a bigger festival. They kept looking for Jesus. And as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" This is similar to what they had asked about the Feast of Tabernacles before. Verse 57, but the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. So he was on the most wanted list, which may have had only one person on it. Jesus was the wanted to be arrested and killed. Although they may not have told everybody that they wanted to kill him, but may have been a private part of their plot. So there's tension. Chapter 12. This is the story of Jesus being anointed by Mary with the perfume. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived. So he coming back in closer to the danger zone. Lazarus lived there, whom Jesus had raised from the dead, and a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. They must have been kind of quiet about the invitations if Jesus was wanted to be arrested. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Typical banquet of the day, as they had a very low table and they would recline on the floor at the table. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. This perfume was imported from India. It was an extract of a herb, and because it was very aromatic, it would evaporate quickly. So it had to be special handling in order to be transported from India to anywhere else. So it was very expensive. Some say it was part of the formula used in the temple incense, and some people used it for the one time in their life when they might have perfume is on their honeymoon night, and so nard was sometimes used for their honey. It was a honeymoon fragrance, and there's a little bit of maybe innuendo here with the Mary's hair and things like that. They were just like this woman touching a man. This is a bit too close for people's comfort, and all this perfume. And this was a huge quantity of perfume that filled the house, we are told. So a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. She may well have bought this to anoint her dead brother, and that never came about. So she might think, well, what can I use this for? To give it to honor Jesus. It's hard to know what was in her mind. Jesus tells us some value of what happened there. That it was anointed him for his burial just ahead of time. So Mary took this perfume, she poured it on Jesus' feet, wiped his feet with her hair. Well, I have never had hair that long, but I don't think that hair is a very absorbent. It's not very absorbent. So, but it would probably, would feel good. It's so maybe that was the intent. the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. One of his disciples, Judas Iscariot. The other Gospels mention that the disciples complained. John names the person who was the biggest problem in this. Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, he objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. Like 300 denarii is what 300 days' wages. Well, it's almost a year's wages. What's a minimum wage now? How much would they earn in a year? And could you buy a bottle? Can you imagine a bottle of perfume costing that much? That is a lot of money. And so Judas objected, says, why this waste? I'll sell it, give the money to the poor. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Well, I would wonder, if he stole money, when could he use it? Were the disciples not always together? And what would he use it for? To make, buy stuff for his house? I don't know. Anyway, but he apparently had this, he was interested in money, and that's ties into his wanting to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So Jesus, yes.
A couple of thoughts. I read somewhere, I can't remember where, but about Mary and the perfume, that this was so expensive, it very well may have been her dowry. And so even though they were well off, this was a lot of money, and it may have been symbolic that this is so important that I don't care about being able to be married, because if I'm giving away my dowry, then I have nothing. Thought on Judas too. If Jesus was talking openly about being killed, Judas may have been wanting to plan his escape, to be able to get out when things got really tough. If he had little or no real loyalty to Jesus and didn't really believe in him, then he might be looking out for himself.
That's a good thought. Yeah. Or is it a bad thought?
Yeah, who knows? It's a thought.
But yeah, that might have been what was going on in Judas's mind. Some think that Judas was trying to force Jesus to use his power and become the Messiah he wanted him to be. But yeah, your suggestion's plausible as well. There, that he wanted an out. It says, well, yeah, it's because if they arrest Jesus, what's going to happen to him? Well, he's certainly not going to be in favor with the authorities. So, yeah, so something like that could have been working. His motives may have been mixed. Yeah.
Or maybe might.
Yes.
Because Mary had already the experience of half kind of like, Jesus, you should have come, but you did not come right away. So my brother died. But now I guess after that instance, it's just like total belief. And I'm not saying that Jesus left already without explaining what happened. Maybe because this is like a story, but in some point, maybe Jesus still explained that he will be dying. And it's, as what Caiaphas was saying, that all these people he has been hearing, he prophesied, or maybe it's just a hearsay that I will die. Maybe it's really coming from Jesus that I will not die only for one person, but for the whole Israel. So maybe now Mary is like, now I understand. You are really going to be our hero and you will be dying. So I guess because of that, she poured. And Jesus did not stop. And he was also saying, she is preparing the like anointing me because she knows that I'm going to die. So I guess Mary is now, oh, I get it. I get it now. So now I'm offering you, like my my love to you by pouring this perfume. I'm not it's just like a thought, it's just like maybe she has been explaining and nobody really understanding, but now Mary gets it, that he will be a hero for the whole nation of Israel. I don't know.
It's interesting to think what the motives of these people are, whether it's Thomas or Mary or Martha or what because we get only glimpses of the story.
Yeah.
And of course, The Chosen tries to fill in some gaps, and other movies will, and some of them will fill in gaps in different ways. But we're still, as we read, we're invited to fill in gaps too. Perhaps part of it is that we're invited to think about what we would have thought, and that we can perhaps learn lessons from what we might have done in such situations. Yeah, don't know. Anybody? Any other thoughts for that? We'll end here today, but
I'm thinking
Yes.
about Mary and her hair. I think it is a very good symbol of humility. Man, if you have to wipe someone's feet with your hair, like I don't have much hair, right? You really have to bow down and your head touches the floor and then wipe. So that is, instead of using a rag or a cloth, using your hair, that is really true humility and respect for Jesus.
Yeah. Just even to touch somebody's feet was humbling. Yeah, it was a dramatic act of adoration that I like. Well, the other gospels have a story about a woman who anoints Jesus with perfume. They don't name her, so some scholars say it's the same story, just in different places in the gospels. Some say it's two different women. Some say it's the same. There are some slight differences in the account, but it's a very similar story. And the other gospels say, what this woman has done will be told wherever the gospel is told. It's like,
I mean,
so significant.
is it not the same like what Jesus did? He is from heaven, came down on earth, stooped so low, gave his life, which is the most expensive thing you can give. And also he went down from heaven to earth.
Yeah.
Kind of symbolic.
Yeah, great parallel there. All right. Well, we'll pick up the story